The way StoryCare is set up is that it's meant to actually go hospital-wide, from administration all the way down to people who are like in transportation. So I might be, we're developing leadership stories. We know that leadership makes a difference in creating a culture of safety. If your leaders aren't supporting those behaviors and reinforcing that with their next level of management, then that next level of management's not going to do it down the line. But it could be a transport tech, someone who's there just with a wheelchair to take a person from their room down to get an x-ray. And so, well, that person probably is not going to do anything to harm the patient, but can make a difference in their experience. We have a story that we just did recently about a tech who's taking a person down to get some x-rays, and it turns out there's going to be a half-an-hour wait, and she's anxious about that. And he has a responsibility to go get another patient, so he's suddenly torn. What do I do? And at that very moment, there's a housekeeper who knows him, who's coming by off of her lunch break, and says, "Hey, how you doing?" And said, and she sort of susses out what's going on. She says, "Well, I have time to sit with Mrs. Smith. I'd be happy to sit with her." And so then you can see the patient suddenly relax. And so the idea is, what we want people to do is we want them to step outside of their role-specific behavior and be able to be willing to do something that's above and beyond for the patient. So here's a housekeeper. It's not her job to do that, but it is her job to make patients happy, and she's doing that. So the stories are all built for that. And so basically what we'll do is we'll take team leaders. So it could be the head of housekeeping, it could be the head of food service, it could be the head of a nursing team, it could be the chief medical officer, head of the doctors. And they will sit down together. When they'll get trained in how to deliver StoryCare, it takes about an hour and a half to really get them up to speed. It could take me 10 minutes to explain it to them, but we give them some training about how to do the process. We support them in that. And then they're off and running. And generally there'll be somebody in the hospital who owns StoryCare, and they may have particular objectives around patient safety or patient satisfaction, and they may be driving down to the leaders what stories they want them to use or what outcomes they want them to work on based on what they've learned from their satisfaction surveys. So there's an integrated process that goes on in the hospital. We've just kicked it off. We're in a number of hospitals now. We're getting really nice response. We're learning some things about how to improve the kickoff becomes very important, how the process is kicked off. You have to have the right team leaders. If you have someone who goes, I guess I'll do this. Well, if they're really not committed to do it, then like anything, it won't work. So you have to have the right team leader who's committed to the process. But we know that once we have that, it works. It engages people, and teams get involved. And it's really interesting to watch. I've watched film of teams who heard their first StoryCare story, and they're sharing and discussing things that sometimes would have taken 3 or 4 months to get to if they had gone through other processes. So it does something, stories do something that allow people to relax their defenses a little. It engages in these cases, these were sort of multitask teams. There you had techs and nurses' aides. So you had people at different levels who are there gathered as a team. They're working as a team. And everybody's chipping in and has ideas about what to do and improve. So from that perspective, it's kind of a democratic process. It's trying to drive change down to the team level. And what happens often in organizations is it's driven by the upper management or the CEOs. And so what happens is if you have people way up here who are trying to drive it down, they don't own it. People down here won't own it. Another change idea coming from up above. But if it's a behavior change that they arrive at, then they're going to own it because it's theirs. It's what they developed, and it's their best practice. It's not somebody else's best practice. It's ours. It's ours. So that's why we think it's powerful.